Let's begin our session. You can recognize the survivors of abuse by their courage. When the silence is so very inviting, they step forward and share the stories so that others know they're not alone. I, Ananya Tyagi, on behalf of Legality Viability, welcome you all for the first webinar on domestic violence amid COVID-19 lockdown. At Legality Viability, we aim at providing excellent services to our partners and ambitious students in order to help them achieve their goals. We launched our services on 1st April 2020, partnering with campuses all over India and growing day by day. We provide services such as free legal lectures as well as notes, which help students to achieve their respective goals. There exist 3 laws in relation to domestic violence: the Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence Act of 2005, the Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961, Section 498A of Indian Penal Code 1860. According to India's National Commission for Women, there have been more than 578 registered cases of domestic violence in the month of March, as compared to only 396 in the month of February. This itself highlights the gravity of the topic we will be discussing upon. Now, I would like to introduce you all to the panel for this session. It gives me an immense privilege to welcome amongst us former Additional Advocate General Shri Amar Vivek ji. As a practicing attorney for 30 years, Sir has handled entire government litigation, handled every cases in relation to infrastructural dispute, commercial laws, electricity regulatory compliances matter, cases of CLUs, land laws, environmental safety and conservation laws, arbitration dispute resolution, disputes of kinds involve IPR, copyright, trademark, patents, IT laws, commercial disputes, cases, civil rent and matrimonial cases, PIL and writ petitions at the Supreme Court and High Court level. Sir has also been the Standing Counsel for the Punjab University for more than 6 years. He is also the counsel for various government bodies, such as Punjab Markfed, Punjab Milfed, Bharat Electronics Limited, NIPER. We welcome you, sir.
You see, when we come to the issue of domestic violence, the first question which comes in our mind that what kind of violence is sought to be envisaged in the parlance of domestic violence, as distinct from what is ordained in Section 498A IPC. Why this domestic violence as a special statute it has been enacted. But before that, I want all of you to ponder over the very scheme of Indian Constitution. What is the importance of the system enshrined in Indian Constitution? If we all ponder over the preamble to the Constitution of India, we all know, and we repeat it very often, that it starts with the words, "we the people." The importance of "we the people" is that the Constitution of India has been enacted by the very people of India, and the people of India have given it to themselves. What has been given by the people to themselves? Let's try to understand. I'm just sharing with you the Constitution. So it reads, "We the people of India, having solemnly resolved." Now, what is the resolution? That means we have all taken an oath, a constitutional oath, to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens. A minister, he will take the oath when he becomes a minister. A judge may take an oath when he becomes a judge. But a citizen has taken a constitutional oath having solemnly resolved to constitute India into sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political. Why social justice has been put ahead of all, and then liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. And then comes equality. If we see this scheme of the Constitution, this in itself is a very wonderful scheme. First of all, we people have to ask ourselves that why are we not able to stop this violence? That means the onus has to come from people to people. We always look at some agency, some government authority, some instrumentality. On the contrary, we must ask ourselves, why this violence from our end? We look at the families, we look at the family structures, we look at the overall organizations, institutions, but do we look at ourselves? Now, the concept of marriage, we all know marriage is an institution. For running any institution, we have trainings, we have programs where we tell how the institution is run. But unfortunately, for the institution of marriage, neither there is a training program that, how to run a marriage, which is an institution, nor there is any place where properly we can give you a counseling for marriage. Now, today, the counseling which is available, this is not a professional counseling for marriage. This counseling is more like, maybe counseling for some mental problem, for other things, maybe psychiatrist, maybe socialist. But we need marriage counselors also, which is the crying need of the hour. We all know that violence, it actually is the result of frustration. Whenever I am frustrated, maybe I may like to indulge in violence with my children, or I may like to indulge in violence with my spouse, just to, finish my frustration, or due to share my frustration that I am indulging in violence. Therefore, let us understand the basic principle. The constitutional principle is that we people are responsible and we have certain responsibility towards the system, towards ourselves, towards our family, towards all the institutions, organizations which we have. So based upon that, from time to time, world over, there have been series of discussions and meetings which resulted into formulation of Domestic Violence Act. Now, the first issue which I raised, why 498A and domestic violence? 498A has criminal trapping. It can lead to conviction of the person who is indulging in certain acts which constitute cruelty. Whereas domestic violence, it provided a civil remedy. Now, this is a very different thing which we are now talking. What is civil remedy? What is the criminal remedy? It was felt that the overuse or excessive use of 498A was resulting into acrimony, was resulting into the breaking of the marriages. Therefore, certain civil remedies were envisaged, due to which Domestic Violence Act was enacted. I will just take you to one of the observations by a law court on this, and then we proceed further. So from time to time, Supreme Court has come on this, and I am reading this observation of Supreme Court. It says that it is a matter of common experience that most of these complaints under Section 498A IPC are filed in the heat of the moment over trivial issues without proper deliberations. We come across a large number of complaints which are not even bona fide and are filed with oblique motive. At the same time, rapid increase of number of genuine cases of dowry harassment are also a matter of serious concern. The learned members of bar have enormous social responsibility and obligation to ensure that social fiber of the family life is not ruined or demolished. They must ensure that exaggerated versions of small incidents should not be reflected in criminal complaints. Majority of the complaints are filed either on their advice or with their concurrence. The learned members of the bar who belong to noble profession must maintain its noble traditions and should treat every complaint under Section 498A as a basic human problem and must make serious endeavor to help the parties in arriving at an amicable resolution of that human problem. They must discharge their duties to the best of their abilities and to ensure that social fiber, peace and tranquility of the society remains intact. The members of the bar should also ensure that one complaint should not lead to multiple cases. So, in the light of these many observations which from time to time Supreme Court has been making, we all have a duty to see that at the end, whatever may be, but the family should not break, the social fiber should not break, because basically domestic violence and its scheme proceeds on the presumption that with the employment of tools, with the employment of remedies, with the resort to the mechanism envisaged in the Domestic Violence Act, the families will not break. Maybe the white ant infested tree will be saved, it will not be cut. With that aim and object, the Domestic Violence Act seems to have been enacted, and this is the observation from the courts which is coming from time to time. So, this being so, I have myself seen, I will share a few of the cases. In one case, there was a marriage of 26 years. And fortunately or unfortunately, the husband happened to be a lawyer. Now, we lawyers have a very peculiar lifestyle. Sometimes we often tend to be too much selfish. We feel that we have an office, we have an establishment, then we have the courts, we have the knowledge, and our knowledge in the law is quite supreme. And therefore, we tend to go overboard. Now, this gentleman lawyer, whose case I am talking about, 26 years of marriage, had two children, 24 years old daughter and 22 years old son. So this gentleman would do nothing. He would be just idling around, whereas the wife, she was a teacher, she was earning. But this gentleman would drink every evening, would come and indulge in violence. So at that stage, this wife approaches me that for 26 years I have been bearing all this and there must be an end to it. So I frankly asked her, I said, would you like a civil remedy or a criminal remedy? What would you like? Would you like to end the marriage? She said, no, I still have a hope that my husband may change. With that aim, we instituted a domestic violence complaint. In that, we sought a relief from the court because the court has the power to grant interim relief, that there are 3 rooms in the house. The wife should be given a shared accommodation in one of the rooms, and the husband should not be given access to that room. Now, being a lawyer, he was aware of the fact that if the court grants an injunction that he will not enter into one of the rooms where wife or the children were staying, then what will be its consequences? Now, the sum total of the story is that with the indulgence of the court, and when we were able to impress the court that there is a possibility that the marriage may survive with certain measures introduced by the court, we will be able to mend the man and save the marriage. So we have to bear this as a prime responsibility, that in the issue of domestic violence, we should be knowing it is preceded by the word domestic, meaning thereby the violence is of not such a magnitude that it ends into punishment. None of the provisions of domestic violence, they end in punishment. Only the violation of the measures granted by the court in domestic violence proceedings may end into punishment, but not the act itself. Act per se, let's see what are the acts which are covered in the definition of domestic violence. The classification of the acts are physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal, emotional abuse, insults, ridicule, repeated threats, economic abuse, and the like. So these are basically covered under the domestic violence. And the remedies which are granted are a residence order under section 19, monetary relief under section 20, then remedies under section 21 and 22. What are those? You see, when we are talking of the remedies, with the aim that these are the civil remedies, then court can grant these short orders. Why I'm saying short orders at the threshold? So that if the marriage has to be saved, then with the employment of these remedies, perhaps the parties may understand that over a period of time, they have to live together as husband and wife, and then the social fiber, the moral fiber, it will not be snapped. I have seen that merely because husband was asked to share his income with the wife, that measure itself proved to save the marriage, because slowly the wife was able to gain economic independence. Economic independence is one of the reasons where husband feels that wife is an economic partner. But in Indian context, I must say, I must be candid enough to say, overwhelming majority of wives who are given some kind of income, whether income is earned by them or this is earned through family or whatever, the wives are in the habit of using that income for the sake of the family only. So tomorrow, husband should not have this unbridled belief that whatever he gives to the wife ultimately will come back to him. Idea is that the moment we give the economic independence to the wife, husband has an obligation towards her to make her independent, and wife gets this thought in her mind that yes, I have my own dignity, I have my own stature, and with that I can start with my head high. So this is one part. And I must also tell one thing at this stage itself, that today majority of the women are working. But for those women who are not working, we have this misconception, gross misconception, that the women are not working. In one of the judgments rendered by the Supreme Court in motor accident matters, where the wife was not working, the issue was that how do we assess the income of the wife? There the Supreme Court came down heavily that we are treating the wives as unskilled worker, meaning thereby we were fixing 3,000 rupees as the salary, monthly salary of the wife, notionally. Whereas we do not realize that wife as the super manager of the house, what all yeoman's service she is rendering to the household. She makes sure that the household starts in the morning. Household is fed in the morning. For that, the kitchen is ready, the table is ready, everybody is able to leave on time because of her. If my wife would not make sure that my breakfast is ready in time, I'm able to leave for the court in time, perhaps I will not be able to do that. She takes care of that. But then more than that, the emotional support she provides, the solace she gives to all the persons. Suppose I am in a bad mood, the way she would take care of the children, or if the children are in bad mood, how she will be able to motivate them. So as a super manager, the role which she plays, no other person in the world can play that role. We all know the famous story of Thomas Alva Edison. He went to school, he was a distractive child. So although there is no confirmation of the truth of this story, but in one of the interviews it has been described that as an 11-year-old child, he was having distraction in the school and his teacher slapped him, because of which he had hearing impairment also, and wrote something on a slip and told him that you give it to your mother. Now this Thomas Alva Edison comes and gives this paper to his mother. She reads it. She had tears in her eyes and she says that your ma'am has written on this slip that you are an exceptionally good child and school is not a place where enough material could be given to you. Therefore, you must be taught at home by your mother. And today onwards, I will be teaching you. And Thomas Alva Edison's mother thereafter bore the responsibility to teach this child. This child started learning from his mother the innovations, the exceptions, the exceptionally good ideas, which ultimately he was able to build. I think something like 1938 patents which he got, they were the result of the training given to him by his mother. And now the icing on the cake. When Thomas Alva Edison's mother died, at that age, maybe at the age of 80, he was surfing through old papers. He came across this slip, which his teacher had given him when he was 11 years old. And when he opened that chit, that slip, it was written that your child will never be successful in life. He is a distractive child. He cannot study. He cannot read anything. He is not fit for our school. He is not fit for our studies. Therefore, you take off the child from the school. Thomas Alva Edison's mother never revealed this to him. You see how much big is the mind and heart of the lady of the house. So when we talk of domestic violence, we have to bear this in mind. That word domestic precedes everything. So this is a very unfortunate situation that today the women of the house is being subjected to domestic violence, then if she's being subjected to domestic violence, it is not easy for her. It is not, it's a very tough decision for her to go to a lawyer. It's a very tough decision for her to go to court and make allegations against her own spouse. But then today, Domestic Violence Act gives that vista, gives that avenue to the wife where she can plead for her civil rights being enforced through the medium of this act. And then ultimately, through those civil rights, the wife is able to get those relief so that the matrimony is saved, so that the wife's status as wife is restored and the family is saved. I am sure that by now the problem of we not being able to connect to Ashu ma'am would have been resolved. Can Ananya help me?
Yes, I'm just checking with ma'am right now.
Otherwise, I will take away the entire cake. Actually, the session was to be started by Ashu ma'am.
But due to some, I think we'll take one question till the time being. If you can
Yes.
answer after
Yes.
that.
Yes, yes.
So there's one very interesting question by Ms. Astha. She says, what are the measures if a man is the victim of domestic violence? Does he get the same protection that a woman gets in the same of the act?
Well, you see, every situation cannot be comprehended by the act. And today, there may be instances where the shoe is on the other foot. Yes, there could be a situation where a husband is a victim of violence. But I would say this is probably 1 in 1 lakh or 1 in 10 lakh. Every act is capable of being misused. Yes. But when we ask this question, first and foremost, we should ask ourselves that merely because sometimes once in 10 lakhs, the shoe is on the other leg, does it mean that we should change the basic structure of this act? I have come across a case very recently during this lockdown period where mother is being ill-treated by her daughter. Now, if the mother is being ill-treated by her daughter, what is the remedy to her? Of course, domestic violence, because she is in the definition of relation. You see, what happens is the act, I would say, is all encompassing. It will provide remedy to the husband also, who is the victim of the so-called violence. But at the same time, we have to bear this in mind, that primarily this act has been enacted to give empowerment, to give civil rights to the wife, to the spouse. Of course, in the definition of relation, in the definition of the aggrieved party, we will be able to see that there is no such discrimination as such. I'm sure that the act will check the abuse, if any, in the due course. But today, let us not discount the fact that all along, I would say, it is the women who is the subject matter of the victimization. I would say one thing with very, very strong feeling in my heart. Today, I'm practicing in the court. I'm sitting in the first line to argue a case in front of a women judge. Unfortunately for me, I would still see my male colleagues passing not very, very decent remarks on what is going on in the courts. If a woman lawyer is arguing a matter, I would see my male colleagues passing all kinds of remarks. What is this society? Today we are in 2020. Where are we? Where is our mindset? What is happening to us? Why are we so perverted in our thinking? This is where I would say the preamble to the Constitution comes into play. We are not minding ourselves of the constitutional oath which we have given to ourselves. We, the people, have declared on solemn affirmation that we will secure social justice. The government is not going to come to me. It is I, as an individual who is under a constitutional oath, that my women folk, that the power which is supposed to go to them must be given to them by me. Therefore, coming back to the question, and sorry for elaborating it, that one-off incidents, we know that there are misuses. We know that Preeti Gupta's judgment of Supreme Court, where Supreme Court has said the women have started, arraying all the in-laws, bringing them to law courts, and there is an abuse. There is a rampant abuse also of the act. Maybe, but we should see the overriding factor. Overriding factor is that today, even today, 70 years after independence, 70 years after the Constitution came into vogue, women are being subjected to humiliation, whatever kind of humiliation. It is the duty of we, the citizens, to protect this constitutional value, because the oath is given to us. Since we are under oath, we must protect it. Therefore, onus lies on us to make sure that the avowed objects of this act, they are able to prevail.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving such a big clarity for this question. Now, I would like to welcome the second panelist for the day, Dr. Ashu Dhiman. Ma'am is an alumni of Kurukshetra University and currently an assistant professor at Geeta Ratan International Business School, New Delhi. Her qualification includes BLLB Honours, LLM, PhD, UGC, NEET, and JRF. She completed her doctorate under the guidance of Professor Dr. Naresh Kumar Butts, who is the registrar of RJNUL Patiala. Ma'am has also been the member of Bar Council of Punjab and Haryana. She has a specialization in business and family laws and has 4 years of research experience and 6 years of teaching experience. Ma'am has also published her papers across various international and national journals all over India and worldwide. She is also the editor of Gibbs Digest Volume 1, Gibbs Law Journal Volume 1. We are glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much for joining here. I would like to start the session. I have brought some lines. I have taken those lines from Instagram actually, and they were so well suited to the situation right now we are handling. They were like, पंछी पेड़ हवा दरिया सुना है सब मजे में है, क्यों ना आदमी को हर साल कुछ दिन पिंजरे में रखा जाए. No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves may walk the path. Lord Buddha has rightly observed. I wish you all a very, very happy evening. I request Sri Amar Vivek, former Additional Advocate General, to accept my sincere greetings and shower his blessing on all of us. Sorry sir, I wasn't able to hear you at that time. I had lost that chance. I'm really sorry sir. I would also like to thank Legality Viability for providing me such a great opportunity to talk on such an important issue, domestic violence, amid COVID-19. Domestic violence is one of the gravest and the most pervasive human rights violation. Friends, as we are in such a crisis, I am thankful to the advanced technology, although I was facing issues with this technology earlier, but still I am thankful to the advanced technology, and I am thankful to the Facebook that it has made me live so that I am able to interact with all of you following these social distancing rules. since due to current lockdown situation, whereas the crimes such as theft, murder, molestations have reduced, the other crimes like cybercrime, domestic violence increased with high speed. As observed by Evelyn Cunningham, women are the only oppressed group in our society that lives in intimate association with their oppressors. But this is somehow outdated right now, because today men are also being oppressed by women. First of all, I would like you to go through the important points I'm going to cover in this session. Talking about present scenario, the concept of domestic violence, reasons of domestic violence, and escalated risk of domestic violence during lockdown, and also about men as a victim who has been ignored. The legal terrorism I'm going to talk about. Well, with the thought of saving lives or to avoid spread of coronavirus, the government announced a national lockdown, but forgot to design the policies to address possible side effects in some areas. And one of such unaddressed area was domestic violence, which may take many lives because it is an indoor crime. Just imagine that you are locked in 4 walls of your house with Danny holding axe in his hand. The situation of those victims is as same as your heart felt just for a moment. National lockdown has taught us many ways to love and create bond with our family, and we usually do post all the things on Facebook, whatever we are doing, and everything has like for some people it is very good, but for some it is really a different scenario, entirely a different scenario. We talk about domestic violence, because I find it disturbing to read how exponentially the number of child abuse and domestic violence cases has grown throughout the world. While going through the news online, I came across some news related to domestic violence during lockdown. I would like to share one or two of them. There was a young woman who rushed to her maternal home just before announcement of lockdown in India on 25th of March to protect herself from the verbal and physical abuse of her spouse. She felt she could remain safe and at peace for some days, but because of lockdown, she could not return to her matrimonial home. Her brother was feeling that she was an additional burden on them due to slide in income. One day, the brother severely beat her up. There was another instance of a woman and her teenage son from the earlier marriage. They were facing the effects of her second husband's frustration over not getting alcohol during the lockdown. She reached out to the police, who provided her with an official helpline number. But the intensity of abuse increased when the husband came to know about her complaint. There was a report published in Hindustan Times. It also disturbs me as it states in the second week of April, the Delhi police recorded a total event count of 2,446 that pertain the event type, that is called, there are event types they give. So the event type was women. The caption that holds that was women. Put simply, nearly 2,500 women in Delhi called emergency helpline numbers, which triggers the emergency response support system of the state police. Of these calls, over 600 were classified as women abuse. 23 calls were reported for rape, while a majority of 1,612 pertained to domestic violence. I think this is a serious situation. The term domestic violence was first used by Jack Ashley in 1973 in an address to the Parliament to United Kingdom. It refers to the form of violence, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal or economic abuse, which is committed by a better half, a spouse, or a partner, though it is a much broader concept and also includes violence against children, parents, or elderly. Women are the main victim of domestic abuse worldwide. In fact, domestic violence is one of the most underreported crimes against women across the globe. Talking about the reasons of domestic violence, the patriarchal setup of society, the dowry system, the underreporting of domestic violence, there are many other dimensions of domestic violence, even including the gender division of domestic work, all of which are rooted in our social system in which men hold a primary power and predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. Yes, you heard it right. I'm directly blaming the society itself for domestic violence every woman faces every day. The society plays a significant role in upbringing of a child, but because both genders take birth in the society and learn the ways which are different for male, and there are another aspects for female for those upbringing, the upbringing of a child in that particular society. The society is always the same. A male child is asked to study and focus on career, whereas a female child, though be asked to study, but also learn the domestic work, the household works, make a habit of listening of everything, whatever her brother or father is saying. This makes a male child to learn from the very beginning. This makes a male child to learn that he is the bread earner. So it makes him the master, and the female is a domestic worker. So, despite doing job, she needs to manage with household and kids. And this feeling of ownership in male makes him dominator, which takes him to the path of violence. Domestic violence is not only a problem in Indian society, but other countries also. But this is also true that India has been considered as most dangerous country for women in reports. As told by our beautiful host during she was telling about us in the meeting, that there are three laws which directly relates to domestic violence in India. The Dowry Prohibition Act, everybody knows, of 1961. Then Section 498A of Indian Penal Code, 1860, talks about the cruelty in itself. Fine. Then the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, which directly hits the issue. Keeping in the view the increasing cases of domestic violence, 1.5 decades ago, the Domestic Violence Act was passed by Parliament with recourse to Article 253 of the Constitution. This provision confers on the Parliament the power to make laws in pursuance of international treaties, conventions, etc. The statute apparently talks about protection of women and provides a civil remedy that too temporary in nature, as it primarily provides for protection orders. This act for the first time in Indian law provided for the definition of domestic violence. The definition is broad, inclusive, and included within its ambit not only physical violence but also forms of violence such as emotional violence, verbal, sexual, and economic. Now, domestic violence can be against a woman, a child, old age person, servant, and even against men also. It is against men also, but whichever is not recognized at least. So I was talking earlier about the rights of the victims. The victims can apply for any relief of recognized under this law, that is protection order, monetary reliefs, custody orders, and residence order or compensation order. The victim can use the services of certain official service providers. The victim can approach a protection officer and ask him for help. Even the victim can ask for free legal aid. The victim can also file a criminal complaint against the criminal or against her husband against law of crimes under Indian Penal Code 1860. Now, friends, the point to be noted here is that filing a criminal complaint can put the offender in jail for up to 3 years. The victim must have suffered graver degree of abuse, because as we all know that 498A of Indian Penal Code talks about cruelty by husband and his relatives. Fine. So the abuse that has been suffered by the women should be of graver degree. Fine. There must be cruelty to be able to file a complaint under this section. And it has been observed by the Supreme Court that domestic violence and the proceeding under section 125 of CRPC are independent proceedings. Friends, let us talk about women in live-in relationship. Earlier we were talking about the wives, the intimate spouse. We were talking about the wives. Now let us talk about the people of the women in live-in relationship, who are protected under Domestic Violence Act or not. Well, I'll talk about a case, D. Veluswamy versus D. Pettiswamy, a wider meaning to an aggrieved person under Section 2A of Domestic Violence Act was conferred by Supreme Court, wherein the court enumerated 5 ingredients. Both the parties must behave as husband and wife and are recognized as husband and wife in front of society. They must be of valid legal age of marriage, as we all know. They should be qualified and to enter into a marriage, that there must not be any spouse living at the time of relationship, and they must have voluntarily cohabited for a significant period of time. They must have lived together in a shared household. Now the question arises, which is a controversial one, because I'm going to talk about Section 2Q of the Domestic Violence Act, that against whom the complaint be filed under the Domestic Violence Act. This issue I have already discussed that it has been a controversial one, because the Section 2Q of the Act defines respondent as any adult male, the person who is or has been in domestic relationship with aggrieved person and against whom the aggrieved person has sought any relief under this Act, provided that an aggrieved wife or female or in a relationship in the nature of a marriage may also file a complaint against relative of the husband or the male partner. In the view of definition of term respondent covering adult male person, the judiciary has time and again been confronted with the argument that aggrieved person can file complaint under the Domestic Violence Act against the adult male person only, and not against the female relatives of the husband, that is mother-in-law, sister-in-law, etc. However, the Supreme Court, while addressing Sandhya Wankhede versus Manoj Bhimrao Wankhede, put to rest the issue by holding that the proviso to Section 2Q does not exclude female relatives of husband or male partner from ambit of complaint that can be made under the provisions of Domestic Violence Act. Therefore, complaints are not just maintainable against the adult male person, but also the female relative of such male. Also, the domestic relationship must be there between aggrieved person and respondent to invoke domestic violence. As observed by Justice Avasthi in Kuldeep Singh versus Rekha in 2009, that if the wife and husband leave the shared household to establish their own household, the domestic relationship comes to an end in relation to parents, and therefore complaint under Domestic Violence Act cannot be maintained against them. As discussed earlier, India has a patriarchal setup, wherein it became an acceptable norm to abuse women. There may be many reasons for crime against women, but occurrence of domestic violence initiate from patriarchal setup, the stereotyping of gender roles, real or perceived in society. The protection of protection of women from the Domestic Violence Act is therefore commendable legislation, as it provides for almost all the remedies which an aggrieved person looks for. It contemplates and recognizes wider forms of violence against women. This act is a break from prior legislations and gives a very extensive definition to the term domestic violence. There is no doubt that act is a hero, but what about the circumstances we are facing today? The lockdown situation. It is leading to the economic losses to the group of society, creating frustration among those who already feel that women is meant to be abused. The situation of those women is getting worse day by day. Talking about the escalated risk of domestic violence during Covid-19 lockdown, as a social distancing measures are put in place and we all are encouraged to stay at home to avoid the spread of coronavirus, the risk of intimate partner violence has been increased. As observed by World Health Organization, staying at home all the time may give birth to stress, the disruption of social and protective networks, loss of income, and decreased access to services, and all these can exacerbate the risk of violence against women. For example, the pandemic created a situation of crisis leading to difficulty in arranging food. Providing food for family is the goal of a lower class man, failing which give birth to frustration that accelerates anger, and lockdown directly hits the desired goal of people of this class. The frustration hits the mind and it comes out on the dominated section, that is women and children. There are many reasons like stress, associated risk factors such as unemployment, frustration, reduced income, limited resources, alcohol abuse, and limited social support. Now this set of circumstances ensures that majority of victims might have preferred to suffer in silence, not out of choice but out of compulsion. Incidents of domestic violence appear to be rising in the country during Covid-19 lockdown, in line with reports suggesting that such cases have increased exponentially across the globe in countries like China, United Kingdom, and United States. In India, the first signs of problem was appeared in data provided by National Commission for Women in mid-April, which suggested an almost 100% increase in domestic violence during lockdown. In 25 days between March 23 and April 16, the NCW received complaints mainly through email and dedicated WhatsApp number. This is almost double the number of complaints received during the previous 25 days from 27 to March 22. Now talking about men as the victim, when most people hear the term domestic violence, they often assume that a man is the aggressor. While this may be true in many of the reported cases, domestic violence against men is more common than you think and can pose a serious threat. Using insult, name-calling and other berating languages, interfering with him seeing his family and friend, showing oppressive, possessiveness or jealousy, shoving, slapping, etc. These are all kinds of humiliating men. There's a sense of patriarchy in India. Men are dominant species. I'm just going to tell you about the reasons. Why is it going so? There's a normal sense of patriarchy in India. Men are dominant species, and even they cannot dominate. When they cannot dominate, feeling the sense of superiority to satisfy their ego is one of the main reasons why cases of domestic violence against men generally go unreported. False accusation of violence or demand of dowry by wife on husband and his relatives is also called legal terrorism. A law which can address these false allegations in the need of hour. Human rights and gender equality should include both men and women. Domestic violence should be considered as spousal violence and must not be differentiated due to gender. Now, my suggestion right now is, except talking about COVID or the situation right now, I would like to address this issue because I want the law on spousal violence, it must be called law on spousal violence rather domestic violence, because domestic violence is providing the protection to women only. What about the men? The law needs to be gender neutral. Domestic Violence Act in India is for women only. Studies show that men are also the victims of violence at the hand of women. Hence, necessary amendments addressing violence against men are suggested. See, men and women are pillars of society and a family. Hence, laws are needed to offer protection to both from spousal violence. Now, I would like to talk about the decision of Delhi High Court. The Delhi High Court has passed an order by hearing a case through video conferencing. It has directed the centre and our government to took on the measure to curb the domestic violence and protect the victims during the coronavirus lockdown. That is a great step. So finally, I would like to suggest that the priority must be given to control the reasons of domestic violence. For example, essential requirements like food must be provided by the government, especially to the weaker section. There must be arrangements for security of women and children by providing some helpline numbers, helping booths, etc., which are there, but they must be boosted. Government must start a common platform to educate the people about the effects of violence on victims and either help the survivors of the domestic violence. Legal education must be provided to women as well through a proper channel. And women should not be allowed to live with her abuser. And police must be easily accessible and must be active to book such abusers on time. People must be made aware that if they find any case of abuse on women or children or elderly, they may also call the helpline numbers to help the victims. NGOs may come forward too, although they are coming, but least. Police must ensure that lockdown measures do not penalize women for seeking support when experiencing violence, such as by going to the police or hospital to report violence. Since we are addressing the issue of domestic abuse during lockdown, I would request everyone hearing me to stay active and report if they find any such case near them and try to provide legal assistance to the victims. The whole world is in problem. And in the end, I would like to end it with the words of Winston Churchill that this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of beginning. Thank you for patiently listening. Yes, there is a question I can see. Can a literal interpretation of the term relatives include the in-laws of husband? So can conduct of parents or sibling of a woman amount to domestic violence by the virtue? See, Sumanath. Yeah. Actually, Domestic Violence Act does not provide the protection of husbands, but I would like to say that there must be a law related to this too, because this is really such a situation where husbands are actually sufferers. And there is a question. Yeah, there are no such remedies so far provided to husbands related to domestic violence. That's why I have asked that there must be a law that must be gender neutral. I'm thankful to everyone for hearing me patiently. Thank you so much. I will look forward to for such good sessions again. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amar sir, for listening to me. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Legality Viability. Thank you so much.